So we're now going to turn our attention to some more combining operators in the observable class. Before, when we talked about this, we had talked about the repeat and merge with operators that returned observables that integrated multiple sources or multiple iterations. We're now going to talk about another combining operator called reduce, which will create a maybe from multiple sources or iterations. So that'll be our focus of this next discussion. So let's take a look and see how this works. The reduce operator is going to take the current observable's values and reduce it into a single object, which is indeed a maybe, of the same type as the emitted items that are coming out of the observable. And the reduction itself is performed by using a bifunction parameter, which is yet another functional interface that's defined, especially in RxJava, but it also has a corollary in modern Java as well. And what happens is basically the parameters pass the intermediate result of the reduction and the current value, and this takes place repeatedly until we've reduced everything to a single value. So here's a very simple example of this. We might have an observable of integers from 1 to 4, and we'll start out by having the value 0. And so we'll take 1, and we'll add those things together if we're doing the addition operator. That returns 1. Then we take that and feed it into the second value in the observable, which is 2. And this keeps going on, so we'll get 3. Then we'll take 3 and feed it into the next value in the observable, which is 3. And we're going to go ahead and add those together. We get 6. And then the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and take 4 and 6 and add them together to get 10. So it's just doing basically pairwise reduction, in this case adding them, but you could multiply them and other things too. Of course, if you multiply them, don't start with 0, because you'll end up with a strange result. The final result that comes out of this is a maybe. And a maybe, as the name implies, either has a value, has an error, or may not have anything. And the reason for this is that if the observable emits no items, then an empty maybe will be returned. So this should say if the observable emits no items, the no is missing. If the observable emits no items, then an empty maybe will be returned. And that's why we use a maybe and not a single. And it's perfectly plausible not to have any items because there may not have been anything in the stream. Now, if cancellation or error occurs, the internally accumulated value that's being processed as we're doing the reduction is just discarded. We say, heck with that, we don't care. And here's an example that shows how to do this. This is going to take an array of big fractions and multiply them together. Imagine, for sake of discussion, that multiply fractions is a method that will implement the RxJava flat map concurrency idiom. And so these things are all chunking away in the background, being multiplied in the computation thread pool. And when we're done, we're going to add all the results together by using reduce. Sources that are infinite and never complete will never emit anything through this operator. This operator expects there will be an end to things. If there's no end, then it'll never generate anything. In fact, you'll probably run out of error. You get the out of memory error exception, which is not a good thing to get, but that could happen if you never have things terminate. So make sure you only do reduce on values or streams rather that have termination, either because they only generate a finite number of items or because you limit them with a suppressing operator like take. So you can see over here, we have some other operations that also work with Project Reactor's Flux. They have the same thing. It works pretty much identically, no surprise. And this stuff also works very similarly to the way things are defined in Java Streams, where you have a reduce operator. The main difference is that reduce typically returns usually a primitive value. It could return a string too, but it usually returns a primitive value, whereas the reduce operator in Project Reactor and RxJava returns something that's a reactive type, like a maybe in the case of RxJava, or a mono in the case of Project Reactor. So that's the end of the discussion of key combining operators. The first part, we'll talk about some more of them in a second.